My name is Miriam, and I am Fabulous Moolah's daughter.
And Mary, first things first, there's been a newspaper article that's floating around the internet that features you, and this is something that people have wanted to know about. So therefore, we're going to ask you. It is a article that says at 15 years old in Massachusetts that the police were seeking a warrant for your mom's arrest because she forced you to wrestle ill. Is that a true story, and
No.
what's your recollection of it?
She did not force me to wrestle. I did fill in for a couple of girls sometime occasionally, but she did not force me. I had a ruptured appendix, and when I was admitted to the hospital, being 15, the police got involved.
I
wanted
see.
to know why I was there without my parents.
And then the police got involved and might have blown it up into something that it really wasn't?
Exactly. Blew it up way out of proportion.
Okay. Well, that's a really big deal because people are using that on the internet, against basically our campaign. So any other comments you have on that?
Well, just that I know that it was a big mix-up about that. And being an only child and the head of my mother to be so popular, I, of course, as a child, was very jealous of her profession because it kept her away from me. And as I grew older, I began to realize why she did what she did, when she did it. I mean, she loved wrestling. That was her life. And I accepted the fact that I was second to wrestling, which was fine.
So tell us about growing up with Moolah. Tell us about your mom and what that experience was like, because there's a lot of folks that are wanting to give their opinion on the person that Moolah was, but because she's not here today, I would imagine, this is just my assumption, that you would know her better than anybody else on this planet today.
I'm sure of that. I did a lot of traveling with her in the summertime, and I did stay with her the full summers, and we went to a lot of different places. And she was just a typical mother then. I mean, she would go in to wrestle, and I would stay with a friend in a motel or wherever we were at the time. And I remember distinctly one summer we were in Texas the whole summer, and we had like a motel there at Alamo Plaza, which was very popular then. This was years and years ago. And it was really a nice remembrance there. But as far as her being a person, I mean, you couldn't ask for a better person.
Overall, these allegations that your mom was a monster, drugged girls, stole girls' payoffs, so on and so forth. What are your thoughts on just all of these? And also just, sending girls to do inappropriate pictures and things like that. What are your thoughts of all of these rumors going around?
I don't know who made up the rumors, but it's a lie. My mother was very, very strict. When the girls would come to her, she would tell them no running around and no drugs and no drinking. If you're here to wrestle, you're here to wrestle, and that's it. If you can't abide by those rules, leave. She did not allow. Matter of fact, I recall when my children, I have 7, 5 regular and 2 adopted children. When I recall my children as they were older, we used to laugh about my mother because she would say, "Oh, they're up there shooting up marijuana." That's how much she knew about drugs. And we really made a joke of that and still laugh about that. As far as the drugs go, and Sweet Georgia Brown, she got into any drugs, that was after she went with Buddy Lee. Because when my mother and Buddy Lee split up, some of the girls went with him, some of them stayed with her. And I understand that Sweet Georgia Brown went with him. As far as them saying that she sent girls to be prostituted, that is the biggest lie that I've ever heard. She's never done that. Never. And I have people here that work for her that will verify that. I'm sure after the split, that I'm not sure, but it could have happened with Mr. Lee. I have no idea. But I know that it was never happened with her. She didn't know anything about it. She wouldn't hardly take an aspirin.
Well, speaking of Buddy Lee, and I'm glad you brought his name up, a question that I have about him, and you can clarify this again because you were there. People are saying, the 20% that your mom took, some saying even 30%, but none of them disputing that it was on the contract and they understood it. However, let's not forget, and again, you can confirm or deny this, but Buddy Lee was taking 50% of all the girl wrestlers, if not more, their booking fee. Is that the case?
I would not be surprised. Buddy Lee was a scammer, and he was from New York originally, and he was a scammer. When my mother was on the road trying to make money, he was shacking up in her bed with Rita Cortez. Okay?
Right.
And she came home early from one trip, and got together, and that was the end of their relationship. And I would not be a bit surprised if he was taking 50 or even 75% of their money, of the girls that went with him. But my mother never did that.
If you could give us an idea of how she treated the girls at the camp. I know already you told us about the rules and things like that, but on a personal level, give us an idea of how that camp was on a day-to-day basis.
Well, she had apartments there. She didn't force the girls to live there. They couldn't have rented any cheaper anyplace else. And in her apartments that she had there. And the rent was very minimum. And the wrestling ring for the training was, she had like a lake between her house and the apartment. And the training wrestling ring was in a garage. It was like a 2-car garage. It was not a barn. It didn't have permanent heat in it. It had heat that they could put on in there and air conditioning they could put on. And the girls would come down. She would want them to come down and work out 2 or 3 hours in the morning and 2 or 3 in the afternoon. If they didn't want to do that, that's their loss. She was not there all the time to train these girls, but she had the best training them when she wasn't there. Girls that she had trained herself. And if the girls, when they were living there and still during training, if they needed grocery money, they borrowed it from her. She didn't hesitate to give it to them. She told them, if you're going to go out in public, you're going to give my wrestling a good name. You're going to dress like a lady. And she didn't want them to go out alone. She wanted at least 2 at a time to go. They went shopping or something, because you just never know what's going to happen. And she was very protective of these girls, very protective of them. And she did good by them, too. And all this, I don't know where they're getting this. She was a horrible person. I don't know how she could be a horrible person when she treated her girls just like they were her relatives. After they split up, they weren't. It says they remained friends. They were very distant friends, because Buddy did her wrong. And why would she remain friends with somebody that was in her own bed making love to one of the girls while she was out on the road trying to make money? That definitely is not right. And like I said about Sweet Georgia Brown, I don't know who brought that up, but she did go with Buddy Lee when they split. Some of the girls went with him, and some stayed with my mother. And the ones that went with him, I would not be surprised if there were drugs and prostitution involved, which would be back on him, not on my mother.
Correct. And also that does, in the Georgia Brown article, it mentioned that the child that Georgia Brown had looked a lot like Buddy Lee. That would sound more like a problem with Buddy Lee after the split than it would be the fabulous Moolah, who had nothing to do with it.
Exactly. That's my whole point right there. She decided to go with him when they split up. So anything that happened to her after they split up has nothing to do with my mother. Nothing.
Absolutely. Mad Maxine. She was with your mom for a very short period of time, but had a lot of negative to say about your mom and insinuated taking payoffs, starving her out, so on and so forth, preventing her from having opportunities. Do you have anything to say about that?
I don't see how she could prevent her from having an opportunity with WWE, as WWE was making the decisions on that, not my mother. And I'm sorry to say, there's a lot of girls that want to get into wrestling, and some of them just are not that good, and they're of course jealous of my mother because she's a natural. She was born to wrestle, and there's a lot of them that are very jealous of her because of that. That they didn't make it as big as she did. And woman scorned, you know how they are. They're going to talk. They're going to make up stories. All I can say to Miss Maxine, tell her to call me. We'll discuss it if she likes.
We'll be glad to pass along your information with your permission, of course. But we definitely will let you know if she wants to have that conversation. And we would love to have record of it. If you guys want to have that conversation on the air, we'd love to have it. Now, let's look at that, though. You did bring up a good point about the WWF making those decisions, in that I understand that Maxine no-showed quite a few times for the WWF, and then later on in the independent scene, and that your mom had to fill in for her, at least when she was with the WWF. Do you recall any of that, and how that might have led to her getting not used at WWF anymore?
I'm certain that was part of the reason, yes. And like I said, it was WW. It's WWE now.
Correct.
WWF. They had to change it from WWF. But anyhow, like I said, they make the decisions on who does what. My mother is not an influence, or was not an influence on what decisions they made. So if Mad Maxine screwed herself, what can I say? Just wasn't that good and didn't show up like she was supposed to.
Can you speak on your mother's empowering of women and what she did as a woman in the 50s, 60s, and on down until her death for women in the sport of wrestling, and really outside of the sport of wrestling, just for women in general? Her strength, what she gave to women.
Well, one thing I know is that because of her, they started letting women wrestle in New York again.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I know she did a lot of petitions and talked to a lot of people. And because of her, that women were allowed to wrestle in New York again. She broke that chain of it.
Which was a big thing at the time.
Yes, it was.
So with that being said, do you have any thoughts for the folks at Snickers who basically pressured the WWE into taking your mom's name off of the Battle Royal at WrestleMania?
Yes, I do. I think instead of taking hereby or hearsay things and causing a big stink about it, they should go straight to the horse's mouth and find out. Like talking to me or talking to some of the girls that work for her that were not jealous of her. And I'm sure that all these women that are bad-naming her, bad-mouthing her, all at some time or other just didn't make the card like they should have. And they were just jealous that they couldn't be as good as her. I mean, let's face it, she was the best. She was a natural. That
being said, what are your thoughts or feelings towards the WWE now with this situation?
I can understand why they would do that. I mean, Vince has a big business there.
Correct.
And I have no hard feelings, of course, with WWE. They treated my mother well. Stephanie came to her funeral and spoke about her at her funeral. I have nothing against WWE at all for this.
Good. And the reason why we're boycotting Snickers now is because they seem to have pulled the trigger way too soon. The WWE is a business that your mom worked for over 50 years.
Right.
They really had their hands tied on this.
Yeah, I think so too. Like I said, they should have, instead of taking taking for granted all of these bad things that are being said. They should have looked into some of the good things too.
What would you like to say to the people, to the wrestling fans in general, about your mom?
I would like to say that I really appreciate their support, and I hope that they will always remember her as the number one wrestler. And if there's anything that I can do as far as helping them remember, or any questions any of them may have, I don't mind answering them at all, because I know she was a wonderful person.
All right.
And she did a lot. She did a lot for all the girl wrestlers and other women as well. I think women as a whole that liked her, it gave them strength, and
Yes, ma'am.
strength to know that they could do for themselves instead of just being just underdogs,
Absolutely. I believe that your mother gave women, taught women a skill, gave women a place to practice that skill, gave women a place to perform that skill, and gave women an opportunity to have a living doing that. And I think
Yes, she certainly did.
I think she was an
If they
asset
loved
to
the
the
sport,
business.
then that was the woman to go to find out how to do it.